My beloved brothers and sisters, one of the quiet sources of stress in our lives is the need to explain ourselves to everyone. We feel pressured to justify our choices, defend our decisions, and prove our intentions to people who were never meant to understand our journey. But Islam teaches us something far more powerful. Not everyone deserves access to your story. The Prophet ﷺ lived with wisdom and restraint. He did not waste words trying to convince people who had already made up their minds. Silence, when chosen with intention, is not weakness, it is dignity. It is self-respect, and it is trust in Allah's judgment over people's opinions. When you stop explaining your life to everyone, your heart becomes lighter. You stop seeking validation from creation and start relying on the Creator. Speak when it is necessary. Stay silent when it protects your peace. And remember, Allah knows your intentions even when people misunderstand you. Not everyone deserves an explanation of your choices. One of the greatest drains on the heart is the constant need to explain your choices to people who were never meant to guide your life. Many believers feel pressured to justify their decisions, fearing judgment or misunderstanding. But Islam teaches us that not every opinion deserves your response. Allah gave you a mind, a conscience, and guidance through revelation, not so you could live by people's approval, but so you could live with sincerity. When you over-explain yourself, you place your peace in the hands of others. That is a dangerous exchange. Your choices are shaped by your circumstances, intentions, and struggles that others cannot fully see. Explaining them repeatedly only opens the door to doubt, criticism, and unnecessary stress. Silence, when used wisely, protects the heart. It reminds you that Allah is the ultimate witness of your intentions. When He understands you fully, you do not need the approval of everyone else. Not everyone who asks questions is seeking understanding. Some are seeking control, validation, or an opportunity to judge. Explaining yourself to such people does not bring clarity, it brings exhaustion. Islam encourages wisdom in speech, not constant disclosure. The Prophet ﷺ spoke when speech brought benefit and remained silent when silence preserved dignity. This balance teaches us that explanation is not always required. You are allowed to live your life without narrating every decision. When you stop feeding curiosity that has no concern for your well-being, your heart becomes lighter. You regain control over your emotional space. Silence becomes a shield, not a weakness. Many conflicts begin not because of wrong choices, but because of unnecessary explanations. When you justify yourself repeatedly, you invite opinions that were never needed. Everyone has a perspective shaped by their own fears, values, and experiences. Expecting them to fully understand your journey is unrealistic. Islam does not ask you to satisfy every mind. It asks you to satisfy Allah. When your intention is pure and your actions are within what is halal, you owe no one a detailed defense. The more you explain, the more room you give for misunderstanding. Sometimes clarity comes not through words, but through consistency and character. Over-explaining often comes from insecurity, not sincerity. The heart seeks reassurance from people when it has not fully settled with Allah. But once you are grounded in faith, you realize that validation from creation is fragile and temporary. People change their opinions quickly. What pleases them today may disappoint them tomorrow. Allah's pleasure, however, is stable and sufficient. When you anchor your heart to Allah, you no longer feel the need to convince others. You move with quiet confidence. Your silence reflects trust, not fear. The Prophet ﷺ faced immense criticism, yet he did not spend his life explaining himself to everyone. He conveyed the truth clearly and left hearts to choose. This teaches us that guidance is not forced through explanation. When you live with integrity, your actions speak louder than your words. Those who are sincere will understand without excessive explanation. Those who are not will never be satisfied, no matter how much you speak. Knowing this frees the heart from endless debate. Not everyone has earned access to your reasoning. Wisdom lies in choosing who you open up to. Islam values privacy and boundaries. Oversharing can weaken these boundaries and expose you to unnecessary harm. When you explain your choices to everyone, you risk diluting your resolve. Doubt can enter through repeated questioning. Silence protects conviction. It allows your heart to remain firm without being shaken by opinions that lack understanding. Many people mistake silence for weakness, but in reality it is strength. It takes discipline to remain silent when provoked or questioned. This discipline protects your energy and preserves your dignity. When you stop explaining yourself unnecessarily, you stop living defensively, you begin to live intentionally. That shift brings peace. Explaining yourself repeatedly can also distort your intentions. You may begin to alter your choices to sound more acceptable rather than remaining truthful. This is dangerous for the soul. Islam encourages honesty with Allah before approval from people. When silence keeps your intentions pure, it becomes an act of worship. There are moments when explanation is necessary, such as clarifying misunderstandings or preventing harm. But these moments are guided by wisdom, not pressure. The believer learns to distinguish between beneficial speech and harmful disclosure. This discernment is a sign of maturity in faith. When you stop explaining your life to everyone, you reclaim ownership of your journey. You stop allowing external voices to shape your internal state. Your heart becomes quieter, steadier, and more focused. That focus strengthens your relationship with Allah. Silence also teaches patience. You learn to sit with misunderstanding without reacting. This patience builds emotional strength. It trains the heart to rely on Allah's justice rather than human approval. Allah knows the truth even when people misjudge you. Not everyone who misunderstands you is meant to be corrected. Some misunderstandings are simply not worth addressing. The believer trusts that Allah will clarify matters in His time if clarification is needed at all. This trust removes anxiety. When you reduce explanation, you reduce regret. Many words spoken in defense are later wished unsaid. Silence prevents this. It keeps your heart clean and your record lighter. The Prophet ﷺ taught that whoever believes in Allah should speak good or remain silent. This guidance protects the believer in all situations. Explaining yourself can also make you vulnerable to manipulation. People may use your words against you or twist your intentions. Silence closes that door. It allows you to move forward without being entangled in unnecessary conflict. As faith grows, the need for explanation decreases. The heart becomes content with Allah's knowledge alone. This contentment is powerful. It frees you from the burden of pleasing everyone. Your worth is not measured by how well you justify yourself. It is measured by your sincerity, character, and obedience to Allah. When this truth settles in the heart, silence becomes natural. The believer who speaks less often listens more deeply. This awareness improves judgment and strengthens wisdom. Silence sharpens insight. Not everyone deserves an explanation because not everyone carries your burden or understands your struggle. Allah does. That is enough. When you walk with confidence rooted in faith, explanations become optional, not necessary. Your life becomes calmer. In the end, silence preserves dignity, protects peace, and strengthens trust in Allah. And that strength is far greater than any explanation you could ever give. Silence protects your peace more than words ever will. Silence is one of the most powerful protections Allah gives to the believer, yet it is often underestimated. Many people lose their peace not because of what happens to them, but because of what they say in response. Words spoken in anger, frustration, or the need to defend oneself often create wounds that linger far longer than the original situation. Silence, on the other hand, places a barrier between your heart and unnecessary harm. When you choose not to respond to every comment, accusation, or misunderstanding, you protect your inner calm. Islam does not teach constant reaction, it teaches restraint. The believer understands that not every battle deserves a reply and not every voice deserves attention. Silence allows emotions to settle and wisdom to rise. It gives the heart time to reconnect with Allah rather than being dragged into chaos. In this way, silence becomes an act of mercy toward your own soul. It preserves dignity, prevents regret, and keeps peace intact long after words would have shattered it. Many conflicts grow not from real problems but from excessive speech. A single sentence spoken without thought can escalate tension, damage relationships, and disturb the heart. Silence interrupts this chain. When you pause instead of reacting, you deny negativity the fuel it needs to grow. The believer learns that peace is not found in winning arguments but in preserving tranquility. Silence does not mean weakness or fear. It means control. It is the strength to step back and choose calm over chaos. When you stop explaining, defending, or reacting impulsively, your heart feels lighter. You no longer replay conversations in your mind or regret words you cannot take back. Silence becomes a safe space where the heart remains protected from unnecessary turmoil. The Prophet ﷺ was a master of silence. He spoke when speech brought benefit and remained silent when words would cause harm. This balance teaches us that silence itself can be wisdom. Many people speak to clear their name but end up losing their peace. Islam teaches us that Allah is the best defender. When you trust Allah to handle what you cannot control, silence becomes easy. You no longer feel the urge to justify yourself to every critic. You allow Allah to see your intentions and leave people to their assumptions. That trust removes a heavy burden from the heart and replaces it with calm assurance. Silence protects your peace by limiting access to your emotional world. When you speak too much, you expose your thoughts, struggles, and vulnerabilities to people who may not treat them with care. Silence keeps your inner life private and secure. It allows you to choose who deserves your words. This selectiveness is healthy. Islam values privacy and discourages unnecessary disclosure. When you guard your words, you guard your heart. Fewer words mean fewer regrets, fewer misunderstandings, and fewer disturbances. Peace thrives in this quiet discipline. Words spoken in defense often come from fear, not faith. Fear of being misunderstood, judged, or rejected. Silence replaces that fear with trust in Allah. When you stop reacting to every situation, you begin to realize that many things resolve themselves without your involvement. Allah arranges matters in ways words never could. This realization brings relief. The heart stops racing and the mind stops overthinking. Silence allows you to step back and let Allah work. Silence also protects peace by reducing attachment to people's opinions. When you speak less, you care less about how your words are received. This frees you from the emotional roller coaster of approval and criticism. The believer becomes steady, no longer shaken by praise or blame. That steadiness is peace. It comes from knowing that Allah's view matters more than human reactions. Many people regret what they say, but rarely regret what they did not say. Silence prevents damage before it happens. It keeps relationships intact and hearts calm. Even when silence feels difficult, its long-term effect is healing. It gives space for reflection and growth. Silence allows wisdom to grow. When you listen more than you speak, you understand more. Understanding reduces frustration. Frustration fuels conflict. Silence breaks that cycle. It replaces reaction with reflection and anger with patience. When you remain silent during provocation, you deny negativity power over you. You refuse to let others control your emotions. This refusal strengthens the heart. It creates inner authority. Peace grows when you realize you are not required to respond to everything. Silence also teaches humility. You accept that not every misunderstanding must be corrected. Some truths are known only to Allah, and that is enough. This acceptance calms the soul deeply. In moments of anger, silence is protection. It prevents sin, regret, and broken trust. The believer who holds their tongue safeguards their faith. This safeguarding brings peace. Silence turns attention inward toward Allah. Instead of arguing outwardly, the believer reflects inwardly. This reflection strengthens connection with Allah. Connection brings peace. Over time, silence reshapes the believer. They become calmer, wiser, and more composed. Their presence alone carries weight. Words become intentional, not impulsive. People may misunderstand silence, but the believer understands its value. Peace does not need to be explained. It needs to be protected. In the end, silence protects your peace more than words ever will, because silence keeps the heart close to Allah and far from unnecessary harm. The Prophet ﷺ chose wisdom over constant defense. The life of the Prophet ﷺ teaches us that dignity is not found in constant self-defense, but in wisdom, restraint, and trust in Allah. He was accused, mocked, misunderstood, and opposed more than anyone. Yet he did not exhaust himself explaining or justifying every action. He understood that truth does not need loud defense to remain true. When people attacked his character, he responded with patience. When they twisted his intentions, he relied on Allah to clarify what needed clarification. This choice protected his peace and strengthened his mission. If the Prophet ﷺ had spent his energy answering every critic, the message would have been drowned in argument. Instead, he chose wisdom. He spoke when speech guided hearts and remained silent when silence preserved dignity. This balance teaches believers that not every challenge requires a response. Sometimes, the strongest answer is composure rooted in faith. The Prophet ﷺ knew that people speak from their own wounds, ignorance, and agendas. He did not allow their words to dictate his actions. This emotional discipline came from deep trust in Allah. He understood that defending oneself constantly can turn a person into a prisoner of public opinion. Instead, he anchored himself in divine approval. When Allah is pleased, no accusation can truly harm you. This understanding freed the Prophet ﷺ from the need to explain himself endlessly. His calm presence carried authority. His silence carried meaning. Through this, he showed us that wisdom often speaks louder than words. There were moments when the Prophet ﷺ clarified the truth, but he did so with purpose, not pressure. He did not react impulsively to criticism. He responded thoughtfully when guidance was needed. This distinction is essential. Constant defense weakens the soul, but selective explanation strengthens it. The Prophet ﷺ taught us that wisdom lies in knowing when to speak and when to remain quiet. This balance protected his heart from bitterness and kept his mission focused. He never allowed ego to drive his responses. His silence was not avoidance, it was confidence in Allah's justice. Despite relentless opposition, the Prophet ﷺ maintained compassion. He did not become defensive or harsh. Instead, he chose patience and mercy. This approach disarmed hostility more effectively than argument ever could. People expected anger and retaliation, but were met with calm dignity. That dignity softened hearts. It made others reflect. Silence became a mirror through which people saw their own behavior. This is a powerful lesson. When you refuse to defend yourself unnecessarily, you allow truth to reveal itself over time. The Prophet ﷺ also understood that defending oneself constantly can escalate conflict. Words spoken in defense often invite more attack. Silence, on the other hand, closes the door to endless debate. By choosing wisdom, he prevented many conflicts from growing. This restraint preserved community harmony and protected his own peace. It reminds believers that not every confrontation deserves energy. Some battles are won by walking away with dignity intact. He trusted that Allah sees everything. When hearts are aligned with Allah, external judgment loses power. The Prophet ﷺ lived with this certainty. It allowed him to move forward without hesitation, even when misunderstood. His focus remained on guidance, not reputation. This teaches believers to prioritize purpose over pride. When you stop defending your image, you free yourself to serve with sincerity. Wisdom over defense also reflects emotional maturity. The Prophet ﷺ did not react from wounded ego. He responded from strength. This strength came from self-control. Anger never dictated his words. Fear never controlled his silence. His responses were measured, intentional, and guided by revelation. This level of discipline is what believers are encouraged to seek. When people insulted him, he often chose silence, not because the insult was true, but because responding would have added no value. Silence became protection, not surrender. It preserved his character and elevated his status. Those who insulted him were left with their own words, while he moved forward unburdened. This teaches us that defending yourself is not always necessary to remain dignified. The Prophet ﷺ also showed that wisdom involves timing. Some truths must be spoken later, not immediately. Silence allows time for emotions to settle and hearts to open. By waiting, he often achieved greater impact. His patience allowed people to approach him with sincerity rather than hostility. Wisdom delayed is often wisdom multiplied. He never allowed constant defense to distract him from worship, service, or compassion. His priorities were clear. When believers spend too much time defending themselves, they lose sight of what truly matters. The Prophet ﷺ teaches us to protect our energy for what benefits our faith and character. Choosing wisdom over defense also teaches trust in outcomes. The Prophet ﷺ knew that Allah would eventually make the truth clear. That trust removed anxiety. He did not rush to correct every misunderstanding. He allowed Allah's plan to unfold. This reliance brought calm and confidence. The Prophet ﷺ lived free from the burden of people's opinions. He cared about guidance, not validation. This freedom gave him inner peace. Believers who follow this example experience the same relief. When Allah's approval becomes enough, defense becomes optional. His silence often spoke louder than words. It carried authority, restraint, and confidence. People listened when he spoke because he did not speak unnecessarily. This teaches us that words gain weight when silence is practiced. The Prophet ﷺ showed that wisdom is strength under control. Defense is easy, restraint is difficult. But restraint builds character and protects peace. This is the prophetic path. In the end, the Prophet ﷺ chose wisdom over constant defense because truth does not need noise to survive. It needs patience, trust in Allah, and a heart anchored in faith. Seeking Allah's approval is better than seeking validation. One of the quiet struggles many believers face is the desire to be approved by people. We want to be understood, praised, and accepted, and when that validation is missing, the heart becomes uneasy. Islam teaches us something far more liberating. The approval of Allah is sufficient and everything else is secondary. People's opinions shift constantly, but Allah's knowledge is complete and unchanging. When you build your life around pleasing people, you live in constant anxiety, adjusting yourself to expectations that never remain stable. But when your focus shifts to pleasing Allah, the heart settles. You begin to act with sincerity rather than performance. You choose what is right, not what is popular. This shift brings peace because Allah never judges unfairly and never misunderstands intention. Seeking His approval aligns the heart with truth and frees it from the exhausting chase for validation that can never fully satisfy. Validation from people often comes with conditions. You are appreciated when you meet expectations and criticized when you do not. This conditional acceptance creates fear. The believer becomes hesitant, overthinking every decision. Allah's approval, however, is rooted in mercy. He knows your struggles, your intentions, and your efforts even when they fall short. When you seek Allah's pleasure, you no longer fear human rejection. You become comfortable standing alone if necessary because you are not alone with Allah. This confidence strengthens faith. It allows the believer to act with courage and clarity even when misunderstood. The heart becomes steady, no longer swayed by praise or broken by criticism. Many people exhaust themselves explaining their actions to gain acceptance. They fear being judged or excluded. Islam frees the believer from this burden. Allah never asked you to satisfy everyone. He asked you to worship Him with sincerity. When your intention is pure, you do not need constant reassurance from others. Their approval adds nothing to your worth. Their disapproval takes nothing away. This understanding transforms the heart. It removes desperation and replaces it with trust. The believer begins to move quietly, confidently, and with purpose. The Prophet ﷺ lived this truth perfectly. He was rejected by many, yet he never compromised his mission to gain approval. He remained firm because his heart was anchored in Allah's pleasure. This example teaches us that seeking validation often leads to compromise, while seeking Allah's approval leads to strength. When you prioritize Allah, you protect your values. You refuse to bend truth for applause. This refusal may cost you popularity, but it earns you dignity. And dignity rooted in faith is priceless. Seeking validation can also distort intentions. Good deeds may slowly become performances. Worship may be influenced by who is watching. The heart becomes divided between Allah and people. This division creates inner conflict. When you seek Allah's approval alone, intentions become clear, actions become sincere. The heart feels lighter because it no longer carries the burden of being seen. Allah sees enough. That certainty brings relief. People may misunderstand you even when your intentions are pure. If your peace depends on their understanding, you will suffer endlessly. But when your peace depends on Allah's knowledge, misunderstanding loses its power. The believer accepts that not everyone will agree or approve. This acceptance is freeing. It allows growth without fear. Validation is addictive. Praise feels good, but it fades quickly. Then the heart seeks more. Allah's approval, however, nourishes the soul deeply and consistently. It fills a space that praise cannot reach. The believer who tastes this closeness no longer craves applause. Their satisfaction comes from obedience and trust. Seeking Allah's approval also strengthens resilience. Criticism no longer breaks you. Silence no longer frightens you. You stand firm because your foundation is secure. This resilience allows the believer to endure hardship without losing direction. Allah's pleasure becomes the compass. When validation is the goal, disappointment is inevitable. Someone will always disapprove. When Allah's approval is the goal, peace is possible in every circumstance. Even failure becomes meaningful when intentions are sincere. Allah rewards effort, not perfection. This understanding softens the heart. The believer who seeks Allah's approval becomes internally guided rather than externally driven. Decisions are made through prayer and reflection, not pressure. This guidance brings clarity. Life feels less chaotic. The heart knows where it stands. Seeking Allah's approval also cultivates humility. You recognize that success is a gift, not a result of pleasing people. Gratitude replaces pride. This humility draws the believer closer to Allah. People's approval may open doors temporarily, but Allah's approval opens hearts and destinies. What Allah gives lasts, what people give fades. This awareness shapes priorities wisely. When Allah is pleased, He places acceptance for you in the hearts of the right people without effort. This acceptance is natural, not forced. It comes at the right time, in the right way. The believer who seeks Allah's approval lives authentically. They are not fragmented by expectations. Their inner and outer life align. This alignment brings peace. In the end, seeking Allah's approval is better than seeking validation because it frees the heart, strengthens faith, and anchors life in what truly matters. Allah alone is enough. When you stay silent, Allah speaks on your behalf. There are moments in life when silence becomes an act of deep trust. The believer feels misunderstood, misjudged, or spoken about unfairly, yet chooses not to respond. This choice is not weakness, it is faith. When you stay silent for the sake of Allah, you hand the matter back to the one who sees everything. Allah is never unaware of injustice, and He is never incapable of defending His servant. Silence in this sense is a form of tawakkul. You are saying, Ya Allah, you know the truth and that is enough for me. This reliance calms the heart. Instead of exhausting yourself with explanations that may never satisfy people, you rest knowing Allah will speak when it matters. History shows us again and again that Allah elevates the silent believer and exposes falsehood in His perfect time. This certainty allows the heart to remain peaceful even when tongues are loud. When you respond to every accusation, you place yourself in the center of the battle. But when you remain silent, Allah takes that place for you. This is a powerful exchange. People's words are limited, emotional, and often unjust. Allah's response, however, is precise and wise. He defends through outcomes, not arguments. He clears names through truth unfolding, not through debates. The believer who understands this does not panic when misunderstood. They trust that Allah's plan will reveal what needs to be revealed. This trust frees the heart from anxiety. It allows the believer to continue living with integrity rather than being trapped in constant defense. Silence also protects the believer from saying something they may regret. When emotions are high, words often cause more harm than good. By staying silent, the believer allows emotions to settle and wisdom to rise. This pause is a mercy. It prevents escalation and preserves dignity. Allah loves those who restrain themselves for His sake. He rewards restraint with clarity and relief. Many times, silence closes doors to conflict that words would have forced open. And in that quiet restraint, Allah begins to work in ways the believer could never manage alone. The Quran teaches us that Allah is the best disposer of affairs. When you trust Him with your reputation, your conflicts, and your struggles, He manages them better than you ever could. Silence is an expression of this trust. You are not ignoring injustice. You are submitting it to divine justice. This submission is not passive, it is powerful. Allah responds to sincerity with support. He lifts the silent servant and places honor where people expected shame. This pattern is consistent in the lives of the righteous. Those who trusted Allah enough to remain silent were never abandoned. Many people fear that silence will allow lies to spread. But lies have a short life. Truth has endurance. Allah ensures that truth eventually stands firm. When you rush to defend yourself, you may actually give lies more attention. Silence starves falsehood. It denies it energy. Over time, reality becomes clear. Allah brings clarity without noise. This understanding brings comfort to the believer. You realize that you do not need to control the narrative. Allah already controls outcomes. When you stay silent, your actions speak louder. Consistency, character, and sincerity slowly reveal the truth about you. People begin to notice patterns rather than rumors. Allah allows this process to unfold naturally. It is far more effective than argument. The believer who remains focused on doing right rather than proving right finds peace. Allah speaks on their behalf through circumstances that no words could arrange. Silence also strengthens humility. You accept that not everyone will understand you, and that is okay. Allah's knowledge is enough. This acceptance removes the pressure to perform or explain. The heart becomes lighter. It stops seeking approval and starts seeking closeness to Allah. That closeness is reward enough. The Prophet ﷺ himself remained silent at times when false accusations were made, trusting Allah to reveal the truth, and Allah did. This teaches us that silence paired with faith is never wasted. It is recorded, rewarded, and honored. The believer follows this prophetic example with confidence. When Allah speaks on your behalf, He does so through unexpected doors. Hearts change, situations shift, truth emerges. None of this requires your constant defense. It requires patience. Patience allows Allah's wisdom to manifest fully. Silence also protects your spiritual state. Arguments can harden the heart. Silence keeps it soft. It preserves your connection with Allah. That connection is more valuable than winning any debate. The believer chooses peace over pride. People may misunderstand silence, but Allah understands intention. That understanding brings reassurance. You are not unseen, you are not unheard. Allah hears even what you never say aloud. Over time, you realize that many things you wanted to explain no longer matter. Allah resolved them without your effort. This realization deepens trust. You become more comfortable leaving matters with Allah. Silence trains the soul to wait. Waiting is difficult, but it builds strength. Strength rooted in faith lasts. Allah rewards those who wait with dignity. When Allah defends you, the outcome is clean. There is no regret, no guilt, no broken ties. Allah's defense brings peace with justice. That peace remains long after words would have faded. In the end, when you stay silent for the sake of Allah, you are never voiceless. Allah speaks on your behalf with truth, wisdom, and perfect timing, and no voice is stronger than His. My dear brothers and sisters, your life does not need to be understood by everyone to be valid. The more you try to explain yourself to people, the more you give them power over your peace. Allah never asked you to convince the world. He asked you to walk with sincerity, integrity, and trust in Him. Silence is not running away. Silence is choosing dignity over debate. It is knowing that people will think what they want, speak what they wish, and judge what they do not understand, and that none of it can harm you when your heart is firm with Allah. So move quietly, live honestly, let your actions speak louder than your words. When you stop explaining your life to everyone, Allah becomes your defender, your witness, and your greatest supporter. And that strength, quiet, calm, and unshaken, is far more powerful than any explanation you could ever give.